The distant wail of a train whistle cut through the morning air as Katherine Harper stood on her front porch, gripping the foreclosure notice so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The bank was taking everything: her ranch, her livelihood, her father's legacy, and she had exactly 7 days to vacate the property or face forcible removal. The weight of 3 years of drought, failed crops, and mounting debts had finally broken her last thread of hope. The year was 1884, and life in Gunnison, Colorado was unforgiving for a woman alone. At 26, Katherine had been running Harper Ranch single-handedly since her father's passing 2 winters ago. The town had changed rapidly with the arrival of the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad 3 years prior, bringing prosperity to some but hardship to others who couldn't keep pace with the changing times. "Miss Harper," called a voice from the road. Katherine quickly wiped away her tears and tucked the notice into her apron pocket. Mr. Yates, the bank manager, sat atop his polished buggy, his round face flushed from the morning heat. "I trust you've had time to review our notice," he said, adjusting his spectacles. "I wanted to personally ensure you understood the terms." "I understand perfectly well, Mr. Yates," Katherine replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "You're taking my family's land because I'm $300 short on the mortgage." Mr. Yates cleared his throat uncomfortably. "It's actually $543 with the accumulated interest, Miss Harper. The bank has been more than patient." Katherine's voice rose. "My father worked this land for 25 years. We've never missed a payment until the drought came." "Business is business, Miss Harper. The First Bank of Gunnison has shareholders to answer to. We've already found a buyer interested in your property, Mr. Henderson from Denver. He has grand plans to subdivide and sell parcels to the new arrivals coming in on the railway." Katherine felt her stomach turn. Henderson was known throughout the county for buying distressed properties and flipping them for profit, with no regard for the families displaced. "I have until Friday," Katherine stated firmly. "The notice says I have 7 days. Indeed it does. Though I wouldn't hold out hope for miracles, Miss Harper. Good day." With a flick of his wrist, Yates set his horse into motion, leaving Katherine in a cloud of dust. Inside her modest ranch house, Katherine sank into her father's old chair at the kitchen table. The home felt hollow now. Most of the furniture had already been sold to make previous payments. What remained were the essentials: her father's rocking chair, the family Bible, and the few pieces too worn to fetch a decent price. Katherine poured herself a cup of coffee from the pot on the stove and stared out the window at her land. The drought had turned what was once lush pasture into hardpan dotted with scrubby sage. The cattle herd that had once numbered over 100 head was down to 12 scrawny beasts barely worth taking to market. Her last 3 hands had left months ago when she could no longer pay wages. A knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. She wasn't expecting visitors, and the townsfolk had largely begun treating her with the awkward pity reserved for those facing imminent ruin. She opened the door to find Sheriff Thomas Miller standing on her porch, hat in hand. "Morning, Katherine," he said solemnly. "I heard about the foreclosure." "News travels fast," she said, stepping aside to let him enter. "It's a small town," he replied, declining her unspoken invitation with a small shake of his head. "I came to see if there was anything I could do to help." Katherine appreciated the gesture, but she knew the sheriff's salary barely supported his own family of 5. "That's kind of you, Thomas, but unless you've got $500 tucked away, I don't see much anyone can do now." The sheriff nodded, replacing his hat. "Well, I thought you should know there's a cattle drive coming through tomorrow. Might be looking for hands. The trail boss is an old acquaintance of mine, Lucas Prescott. Decent sort. I could put in a word, maybe get you hired on for a spell. At least give you something to fall back on when. He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. When I'm homeless, Katherine finished for him. I appreciate the thought, but I've got too much to do here. Need to figure out what I can salvage and where I'll go. Offer stands, Sheriff Miller said. They'll be making camp at Elk Creek tomorrow night if you change your mind. After the sheriff left, Katherine spent the day taking inventory of her possessions, sorting what little she could carry if forced to leave. By sundown, exhaustion overtook her, and she fell asleep at the kitchen table, her head resting on her folded arms. Morning brought no relief from her troubles. Katherine rose early and headed to the barn. If nothing else, the animals still needed tending. As she approached, she noticed something unusual: fresh hoofprints in the dirt that weren't there the previous evening. Inside the barn, a tall stranger stood examining her plow. His back was to her, but she could see he was solidly built, with broad shoulders under a dust-covered denim jacket. A well-worn cowboy hat sat atop dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. "Can I help you with something?" Katherine demanded, grabbing a pitchfork from the wall. "This is private property." The man turned slowly, his hands raised slightly in a non-threatening gesture. His face was sun-browned and weathered, but his eyes were kind of clear, striking blue that reminded Katherine of the Colorado sky after a rainstorm. He appeared to be in his early 30s, with several days of stubble darkening his jaw. "Apologies, madam," he said, his voice deep and measured. "Didn't mean to trespass. Gate was open and I saw the barn. Thought I'd check if anyone was hiring." "Well, we're not," Katherine said firmly, though she didn't lower the pitchfork. "In fact, quite the opposite. So unless you're looking to buy a nearly broken-down ranch with no water and poor grazing, you're wasting your time." The man's gaze traveled from Katherine to the pitchfork and back again, a slight smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I'm Lucas Prescott, trail boss for the Whitman herd heading north. Sheriff Miller mentioned you might be in need of work, not offering it." Katherine slowly lowered the pitchfork, feeling her cheeks flush with embarrassment. "You're early. Sheriff said you wouldn't be at Elk Creek until tonight." Pushed the herd harder than expected. "Good grass there. Thought I'd ride ahead and see the lay of the land." He gestured toward the pitchfork. "You always greet visitors so enthusiastically, Miss Harper." "Only the ones who don't announce themselves properly," she replied, setting the tool aside. "And it's Katherine." Lucas nodded. "Katherine, then. Sheriff Miller mentioned your situation, said you're good with horses and no ranching inside and out." "Thomas talks too much," Katherine muttered. "But yes, I was raised on this ranch. My father taught me everything he knew before he passed." Lucas studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "We could use someone with your skills. Pays fair $3 a day plus meals. Drive should take another 2 weeks to reach Fort Collins." Katherine considered the offer. The money wouldn't be enough to save the ranch, but it would give her a small nest egg to start over somewhere else. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Prescott, but I've got affairs to settle here before the bank takes over on Friday." "Lucas," he corrected. "And the offer stands if you change your mind. We'll be at Elk Creek through tomorrow morning." He tipped his hat and turned to leave. "Wait," Katherine called after him. "You said Sheriff Miller told you about my situation. What exactly did he say?" Lucas paused at the barn door. "Said you were the finest horsewoman in 3 counties, and that the bank was foreclosing on your place on account of drought and hard times, not poor management. Said it was a damn shame, if you'll pardon my language." Katherine nodded, fighting the lump in her throat. "Thank you for stopping by, Lucas." After he left, Katherine went about her chores mechanically, her mind churning over her limited options. By midday, she'd made her decision. She would join the cattle drive not because it would solve her problems, but because it offered a path forward when all others seemed closed. She spent the afternoon packing her saddlebags with the few clothes she could carry and securing her most precious possessions in a small trunk that she could retrieve later. As the sun began to set, she saddled her mare, Willow, prepared to ride to Elk Creek at first light. That evening, as darkness fell, Katherine sat on her porch watching fireflies rise from the meadow grass. The familiar sounds of night creatures filled the air, crickets chirping, an owl hooting from the old cottonwood tree. She tried to commit it all to memory, knowing these might be her last nights on the land that had always been home. A movement at the far end of the drive caught her attention. A rider approached, silhouetted against the fading light. As he drew closer, she recognized Lucas Prescott's broad-shouldered frame. "Evening," he called, dismounting at the porch steps. "Hope I'm not intruding." "Twice in one day, Mr. Prescott. People will talk," Katherine replied, but there was no hostility in her tone. "Lucas," he reminded her again, "and I doubt that. I came because I had a proposition for you, one that might interest you more than joining our drive." Katherine raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." "I've been looking at ranches in this area. Was planning to buy something after this drive concludes. Your place, it's got good bones. Needs work, sure, but the location's prime with the river access and proximity to town." Katherine stiffened. "If you're here to buy my misfortune at a discount, you can turn right around, Mr. Prescott. I've had enough vultures circling." Lucas shook his head. "That's not what I'm proposing. I've got money saved from 5 years of drives, looking to put down roots, run my own operation. What I don't have is knowledge of this specific region, water patterns, winter grazing options, local markets." "And," Katherine prompted, unsure where he was heading. "And you have all that knowledge, plus skills I've rarely seen matched. Sheriff mentioned you broke and trained the finest cutting horses in the county." Katherine couldn't deny it. Her father had taught her the art of horse training from the time she could walk, and her reputation with difficult horses had spread throughout the region. "What exactly are you suggesting?" she asked. "A partnership," Lucas said simply. "I pay off your debt to the bank. You stay on the property. We run it together, your expertise, my capital. Split the profits equally." Katherine stared at him in disbelief. "You'd pay over $500 to go into business with a woman you just met this morning. Either you're the most trusting man alive or the most foolish." Lucas smiled, the expression transforming his serious face. "Neither, I hope. I've been in this business long enough to recognize value when I see it. This land has potential. You know how to realize that potential. Seems like good business to me. And if I refuse, then the offer to join the drive still stands," he said with a shrug. "No obligation either way." Katherine studied him in the fading light, looking for any sign of deception. "Why would you do this?" "Because I've been where you are," Lucas said quietly. "Lost my family's place in Texas after the war. Nobody stepped up then. Always wished someone had." There was sincerity in his eyes that Katherine couldn't dismiss. Still, caution prevailed. "I'd need everything in writing, a proper contract." "Wouldn't have it any other way," Lucas agreed. "We can see the lawyer in town tomorrow, make it official before I pay the bank." Katherine extended her hand. "I'll consider your offer overnight and give you my answer in the morning." Lucas took her hand, his grip firm but not overpowering. "Fair enough." After he rode away, Katherine remained on the porch long into the night, weighing her options. A partnership with a stranger seemed risky, but losing her home entirely was a certainty otherwise. By morning, her decision was made. Lucas returned at dawn as promised. They rode into Gunnison together, an unusual pair drawing curious glances from the townspeople. At the law office of Henry Wilson, they drafted a partnership agreement that protected both their interests. Katherine insisted on a clause that would allow her to buy out Lucas's share over time if she chose, and to her surprise, he readily agreed. Their next stop was the First Bank of Gunnison, where Mr. Yates nearly dropped his spectacles when Lucas counted out $543 in cash, and Katherine presented him with a receipt for the debt settlement. "This is most irregular," Yates sputtered. Mr. Henderson was quite set on purchasing the property. "He's already in town finalizing his plans." "The debt's been paid in full," Lucas stated firmly. "The property remains with its rightful owner, as per your own bank's terms." Yates had no choice but to acknowledge the payment and cancel the foreclosure, though his displeasure was evident in every movement as he stamped the necessary documents. As they left the bank, Katherine felt lightheaded with relief. "I can't quite believe it," she said. "Yesterday I was facing ruin, and Today we're business partners," Lucas finished for her, "and we have work to do. I need to return to my herd and get them to Fort Collins. Should take about 2 weeks. Will you be all right here until then?" Katherine nodded. "More than all right. I've got plans to make and a ranch to start putting back in order." "Good," Lucas said. "When I return, we'll discuss improvements and restocking. I've got connections for decent cattle prices in Wyoming." As Lucas prepared to ride out to rejoin his drive, Katherine stopped him. "Why did you really do this, Lucas? And don't tell me it's just good business." Lucas considered her question carefully. "Maybe I recognized something in you that reminded me of myself. Determination, grit, too stubborn to know when to quit." He smiled slightly. "Or maybe I just couldn't bear to see good land and a good rancher go to waste." With that, he tipped his hat and rode away, leaving Katherine to wonder about the man who had just become her partner and savior. The next 2 weeks passed in a flurry of activity for Katherine. With renewed energy and purpose, she set about repairing fences, clearing irrigation channels, and preparing for the changes ahead. The news of her partnership with Lucas Prescott spread quickly through Gunnison, eliciting reactions ranging from skepticism to outright disapproval. "Mighty convenient arrangement," commented Mrs. Hollister at the general store when Katherine came in for supplies. "A single woman partnering with an unmarried man. In my day, we called that something else entirely." Katherine met the older woman's gaze steadily. "In your day, Mrs. Hollister, would you have preferred I lost my home instead? Because those were my options." The gossip stung, but Katherine refused to let it dampen her spirits. For the first time in years, she had hoped for the future of Harper Ranch, or Harper Prescott Ranch, as it was now legally known. True to his word, Lucas returned exactly 15 days after their agreement was signed. He rode in just before sunset, leading a pack horse loaded with supplies and looking trail-weary but satisfied. "Cattle delivered, contracts fulfilled," he announced as Katherine met him at the gate. "And I've got news. Spoke to a rancher outside Laramie who's looking to reduce his herd before winter. We can get 30 head at a fair price if we can pick them up within the month." Katherine smiled. "Welcome back, and that's excellent news. The south pasture will be ready by then. I've repaired most of the fencing." Lucas glanced around the property, nodding approvingly at the visible improvements. "You've been busy." "Had to earn my keep in this partnership," Katherine replied. "Come inside. You look like you could use a hot meal and coffee." Over dinner, they discussed their plans for the ranch in detail. Lucas had practical ideas about diversifying their operation, raising horses alongside cattle, perhaps adding some sheep, despite the traditional antipathy between sheep and cattle ranchers. "The railway means we can get products to market faster," he explained. "We should take advantage of that wool, beef, and trained horses could give us 3 income streams instead of relying on just one. Katherine was impressed by his business acumen. My father always said not to put all your eggs in one basket, but in practice, we never had the capital to diversify. Well, now we do, Lucas said. I've set aside enough to get us through the first year, even if we face setbacks. As the weeks passed, their partnership found its rhythm. Lucas handled the heavy labor and business negotiations, while Katherine managed the day-to-day operations and began training the first of what they hoped would become a renowned string of cutting horses. They hired 2 hands to help with the ranch work brothers named Sam and Jake Turner, who had worked the property years earlier under Katherine's father. The men were initially wary of taking orders from a woman, but Katherine's knowledge and Lucas's backing quickly earned their respect. By December, the ranch was showing signs of recovery. The 30 head of cattle from Wyoming had arrived, along with 5 promising young horses that Katherine had handpicked for training. They'd repaired the main barn, reinforced the house against winter weather, and dug a new well that promised a more reliable water source than they'd had before. On Christmas Eve, a heavy snow blanketed Gunnison. Katherine prepared a special dinner to celebrate their first successful months as partners. Lucas contributed a bottle of good whiskey and small gifts for everyone, new gloves for the Turner brothers, and a finely crafted leather journal for Katherine. For planning our next year, he explained as she unwrapped it. Thought you might like keeping track of our progress. Katherine was touched by the thoughtfulness. I have something for you too, she said, handing him a package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a hand-tooled leather belt with his initials worked into the design. I've been working on it at night, she explained. My father taught me leatherworking when I was young. Lucas ran his fingers over the intricate pattern. This is masterful work, Katherine. Thank you. That evening, after the Turner brothers had retired to the bunkhouse, Katherine and Lucas sat before the fireplace, enjoying the quiet and warmth. I've been meaning to ask, Katherine said after a comfortable silence. You mentioned losing your family's ranch in Texas. What happened after? Lucas took a slow sip of whiskey before answering. Drifted for a while. Worked ranches across 5 states. Fought Indians in Arizona Territory for a spell, though I'm not proud of that chapter. Eventually found my way to cattle driving. Good money if you're willing to work hard and take risks. No family, Katherine asked, immediately regretting the personal nature of the question, but Lucas didn't seem to mind. Had a younger sister. She married a shopkeeper in San Antonio. They're doing well. Parents both gone, father at Gettysburg, mother from fever 2 years later. I'm sorry, Katherine said softly. Lucas shrugged. Long time ago now, what about you? No suitors beating down your door before the ranch hit hard times, Katherine laughed. There were a few interested parties over the years, none that interested me back. My father always said I was too stubborn for my own good. Said any man who took me on would need the patience of Job and the strength of Samson. Sounds about right, Lucas said with a smile that took any sting from the words. As winter deepened, they fell into comfortable routines. During the day, they worked side by side, their partnership growing more seamless as they learned each other's strengths and compensated for weaknesses. In the evenings, they would often sit by the fire, discussing plans or simply enjoying each other's company in companionable silence. Katherine found herself looking forward to these quiet moments. Lucas was unlike any man she'd known, respectful of her opinions, appreciative of her skills, and utterly lacking in the condescension she'd grown accustomed to from men in positions of authority. For his part, Lucas seemed content with their arrangement, never pushing for anything beyond their business partnership. Yet Katherine occasionally caught him watching her when he thought she wouldn't notice, his expression thoughtful and perhaps a little wistful. Spring arrived with its usual chaos of calving season and preparing fields for planting. Their days stretched from before dawn until well after dusk, leaving little time for conversation that wasn't directly related to ranch operations. In late April, Lucas announced he needed to make a trip to Denver to meet with potential buyers for their first horses ready for market. "Should be gone about a week," he told Katherine over breakfast. "Think you and the Turners can manage?" "We managed before you came along," Katherine reminded him with a smile. "We'll be fine." 3 days after Lucas departed, disaster struck. A late spring storm roared in from the mountains, bringing freezing rain that turned to heavy, wet snow. Katherine and the Turner brothers worked frantically to bring the vulnerable newborn calves into the barn, but the sudden temperature drop proved fatal for several of the youngest animals. By morning, the storm had passed, but the damage was evident. Besides the lost calves, a section of the repaired barn roof had collapsed under the weight of the snow, and the creek had overflowed, washing out part of the road to town. Katherine surveyed the damage with a heavy heart. It wasn't catastrophic, but it was a significant setback, just as they were beginning to gain momentum. She set the Turner brothers to work on the most critical repairs while she tended to the remaining livestock. That evening, bone-weary and discouraged, Katherine was startled by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Lucas appeared in the yard, his horse mud splattered and steaming from hard riding. "What are you doing back so early?" she called, hurrying to meet him. "Got word of the storm in Denver." "Knew we'd have calves at risk." He dismounted, his concerned gaze taking in her exhausted appearance and the damaged barn. "How bad?" "Lost 7 calves. Barn roof partially collapsed, creek washed out the lower road." Lucas nodded grimly. "Could have been worse, you hurt?" The question caught her off guard. "No, I'm fine, just tired." "Get inside," he said. "I'll check on the livestock and join you shortly." Too weary to argue, Katherine obeyed. She stoked the fire and put coffee on to boil, sinking into a chair at the kitchen table. She must have dozed off because the next thing she knew, Lucas was gently shaking her shoulder. "Katherine," he said softly, "you need proper rest. Go to bed. I'll handle things for now." She blinked up at him, momentarily disoriented. "You rode all the way back from Denver because of a storm." Lucas poured himself coffee, avoiding her gaze. "It was the responsible thing to do. This is my ranch, too." "What about your meetings with the horse buyers?" "Rescheduled," he said simply. "Some things are more important." In that moment, watching him shed his coat and roll up his sleeves to tackle whatever needed doing despite having ridden hard for hours, Katherine realized something had shifted in her feelings toward Lucas Prescott. What had begun as gratitude and professional respect had grown into something deeper, something that made her heart beat faster when he was near. The realization was unsettling. Their partnership worked because it was uncomplicated by romantic entanglements. Introducing such feelings could jeopardize everything they'd built together. "Thank you for coming back," she said, rising from the chair. "But you're right, I need sleep. We can assess the full damage in the morning." If Lucas noticed her sudden awkwardness, he didn't comment on it. "Sleep well, Katherine." Over the next few days, they worked to repair the storm damage, their usual easy rapport replaced by a subtle tension that neither acknowledged. Katherine found herself hyper-aware of Lucas's presence, the sound of his voice, the brush of his arm against hers as they worked side by side, the rare moments when he truly smiled and the expression transformed his serious face. A week after the storm, with repairs nearly complete, Katherine rode into Gunnison for supplies. At the general store, she encountered Sophia Jenkins, the young widow who ran the millinery shop. "Katherine, Just the person I wanted to see, Sophia called, approaching with a warm smile. I'm hosting a spring social at my home this Saturday. Nothing fancy, just some music, food, and company. You and Mr. Prescott should come. I don't know, Sophia, Katherine hedged. We've got so much work after the storm. Nonsense, Sophia interrupted. Everyone needs a night off occasionally. Besides, she added with a meaningful look, half the county is buzzing about you two living out there alone together. A public appearance would quiet some of the gossip. Katherine sighed. The rumors had persisted despite their strictly professional relationship. I'll ask Lucas, but I can't promise anything. When she mentioned the invitation that evening, Lucas surprised her by agreeing readily. Might do us good to socialize a bit. And Sophia's right an appearance in town wouldn't hurt our standing. Saturday evening found them dressed in their best clothes, Katherine in a dark green dress she rarely had occasion to wear, and Lucas in a clean black suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and made him look more Eastern businessman than Western cattleman. You clean up well, Katherine remarked as he helped her into the buggy. As do you, he replied, his eyes lingering on her for a moment longer than necessary. That color suits you. The gathering at Sophia's home was larger than Katherine had anticipated. Nearly 40 of Gunnison's residents had turned out, including several eligible young women who immediately took notice of Lucas. Your business partner is causing quite a stir, Sophia commented, appearing at Katherine's side with a glass of punch. Miss Dunwoody has already asked if he's spoken for. Katherine felt an unexpected twinge of jealousy. He's free to court whoever he pleases. Sophia gave her a knowing look. Is he? Because the way he keeps looking at you suggests otherwise. Before Katherine could respond, the small ensemble of musicians struck up a lively tune and couples began to form for dancing. May I have this dance? Lucas appeared before her, hand extended. Katherine hesitated. I'm not much of a dancer. Neither am I, he admitted. But it would be a shame to waste your fine dress standing against the wall all evening. She took his hand, allowing him to lead her to the area cleared for dancing. Lucas was being modest. He moved with natural grace, guiding her through the steps with gentle pressure at her waist and hand. You lied about not dancing well, Katherine accused lightly. Not entirely. My mother insisted on lessons when I was young. Haven't had much cause to use them since. As they moved together, Katherine became increasingly aware of his proximity, the warmth of his hand at her waist, the faint scent of soap and leather that clung to him, the way his eyes never left her face. When the music ended, Lucas didn't immediately release her. Would you like some air? He asked. It's getting rather warm in here. Outside on Sophia's porch, the spring night was cool and star-filled. They stood in silence for a moment, looking out at the town's twinkling lights. Katherine, Lucas began, his voice unusually hesitant. There's something I've been meaning to discuss with you. Her heart quickened. Yes, our partnership, it's working well. The ranch is recovering faster than I'd hoped, but I've been thinking about the future. Oh. Katherine tried to keep her voice neutral, though disappointment washed through her. Was he planning to leave once the ranch was profitable again? Yes. You see, Mr. Prescott. Miss Dunwoody appeared in the doorway, her pretty face alight with a determined smile. They're forming sets for a quadrille. I'm in desperate need of a partner. Lucas glanced at Katherine, seeming reluctant to leave their conversation unfinished. Perhaps another time, Miss Dunwoody. I was just— Oh, I insist, the young woman said, boldly taking his arm. Katherine won't mind, will you, dear? You've had him all to yourself these many months. Put on the spot, Katherine forced a smile. Of course not. Go ahead, Lucas. With visible reluctance, Lucas allowed himself to be led back inside, throwing an apologetic look over his shoulder. Katherine remained on the porch, her emotions in turmoil. What had Lucas been about to say? And why did the sight of him dancing with pretty, vivacious Miss Dunwoody fill her with such unreasonable jealousy? She was still pondering these questions when Sheriff Miller joined her on the porch. "Even in, Katherine," he greeted her. "Fine gathering Widow Jenkins has put together." "Indeed," Katherine agreed absently. The sheriff followed her gaze to where Lucas was now conversing with a group that included Miss Dunwoody and her father, a prominent local businessman. "Prescott seems to be fitting in well. Town's talking about how he's turned your place around." "We've done it together," Katherine corrected. "Course you have," Miller agreed quickly. "Wasn't suggesting otherwise. In fact, most folks are mighty impressed with how you've held your own in the partnership, though there is talk." Katherine sighed. "About the propriety of our arrangement, yes, I'm well aware." "Actually," the sheriff said, "the talk lately is more about when you two might make the arrangement more permanent. Natural progression, some would say." Katherine stared at him. "I beg your pardon," Miller shifted uncomfortably. "Just repeating what I've heard, Katherine, no offense meant. For what it's worth, I think you'd make a fine match. Prescott's a good man, one of the best I've known." Inside, the music had stopped. Katherine could see Lucas making his way toward the door, his expression determined. She wasn't ready to face him or whatever he had been about to say. "If you'll excuse me, Sheriff," she said hurriedly. "I just remembered I promised to help Sophia in the kitchen." For the remainder of the evening, Katherine carefully avoided being alone with Lucas, engaging in conversations with various townspeople and volunteering to help serve refreshments. When it was finally time to leave, the buggy ride home was filled with awkward silence. As they approached the ranch, Lucas finally spoke. "Did I do something to offend you this evening, Katherine?" "Not at all," she replied too quickly. "I'm just tired. It's been a long week." Lucas pulled the buggy to a stop in front of the house but made no move to descend. "There's something between us that needs addressing," he said directly. "I tried earlier, but we were interrupted." Katherine's pulse quickened. "Lucas, please let me finish," he said. "When I proposed our partnership, it was purely a business decision. A good investment, I thought, but over these months something has changed, at least for me." He turned to face her fully, his expression earnest in the moonlight. "I find myself thinking of you at odd moments. Worrying when you're out checking fence lines alone, looking forward to our conversations by the fire each evening." Katherine's breath caught in her throat. "What are you saying, Lucas?" "I'm saying that my feelings for you have grown beyond business, beyond friendship even. I'm saying that I care for you, Katherine, more deeply than I intended or expected." His honesty left her momentarily speechless. When she didn't immediately respond, uncertainty crossed his features. "If you don't share these feelings, I understand completely," he continued. "Nothing need change with our arrangement. I value our partnership too much to jeopardize it. I just needed you to know." "Lucas," Katherine began carefully, "when you paid my debt and offered this partnership, you gave me back my home, my future. I've been cautious about examining my feelings too closely, afraid that gratitude might be coloring my perception. And now," he asked quietly. "Now I know it's more than gratitude," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "When I saw you with Miss Dunwoody tonight, I realized how much I've come to care for you too." The relief and joy that spread across Lucas's face made him look younger, almost boyish. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he reached for her hand. "May I call on you properly, then?" "Court you as you deserve." Katherine couldn't help but laugh. "We live in the same house, Lucas. We see each other from sunrise to sunset every day. All the more reason to do this properly," he insisted. "You deserve to be courted, Katherine Harper, not just partnered with." His sincerity touched her deeply. "Yes, Lucas, you may court me, though I can't imagine how it will differ from our current arrangement." "Oh, I have ideas," he said with a smile, helping her down from the buggy. "Starting with this." Gently, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her a tender, questioning kiss that spoke of respect and promise. When they parted, Katherine felt as though something long dormant within her had awakened. "Good night, Katherine," Lucas said softly. "I'll see to the horse." As spring blossomed into summer, their courtship progressed alongside the prosperity of the ranch. True to his word, Lucas found ways to distinguish their romantic relationship from their business partnership, bringing her wildflowers after checking the north pasture, reading aloud to her in the evenings from a book of poetry he'd ordered from Denver, planning picnic lunches by the creek on rare afternoons when work permitted. In July, they drove their first significant cattle shipment to the railway stockyard, 60 head, that brought a handsome profit. To celebrate, Lucas took Katherine to dinner at Gunnison's finest restaurant, followed by a stroll along the riverbank where they had first sealed their partnership agreement. "I have something for you," Lucas said as they watched the moonlight shimmer on the water. From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box. "This was my mother's. I've kept it all these years, waiting for the right person." Inside the box was a delicate gold ring set with a single perfect pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. "Lucas," Katherine breathed, stunned by the beauty of the piece. He took her hand, his expression solemn yet tender. "Katherine Harper, when I rode onto your ranch that day, I was looking for temporary work, not a permanent home. But that's what I found with you, a home, a purpose, and a love I never expected. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears filled Katherine's eyes. "Are you sure? There are prettier, younger women in town who would." "There's only you," Lucas interrupted firmly. "Only ever you." "Then yes," Katherine said, her voice steady despite her tears. "Yes, I will marry you, Lucas Prescott." The news of their engagement spread quickly through Gunnison. Most responses were congratulatory, though a few, like Mrs. Hollister, sniffed that they'd suspected as much all along, and that it was about time they made an honest arrangement of it. They planned a September wedding after the summer work, but before winter preparations would begin. Katherine found herself suddenly welcomed into the social circles that had largely excluded her during her financial troubles, invited to teas and sewing circles, where the conversation inevitably turned to wedding plans and homemaking advice. "You'll move your things to the main bedroom, of course," Mrs. Peterson instructed during one such gathering. "A husband expects certain comforts and privileges. And you'll need to hire a proper housekeeper," added Mrs. Dunwoody, whose daughter had quickly found another prospective husband after Lucas's engagement. "A rancher's wife has social obligations in town. You can't be expected to manage the house and fulfill your duties to the community." Katherine listened politely, but had no intention of following such advice. She and Lucas had built their relationship on mutual respect and partnership. She had no plans to transform into a society wife who delegated all practical matters to servants. When she relayed these conversations to Lucas that evening, he laughed. "They clearly don't know you very well. Or me, for that matter. You don't want a wife who spends her days planning dinner parties and making social calls," Katherine teased. "I want the woman I fell in love with," Lucas replied seriously. "The one who can outride most men, who knows every inch of our land, who works from sunup to sundown without complaint. If I'd wanted a decorative wife, I wouldn't have proposed to the most stubborn, capable woman in Colorado territory." The wedding took place on a perfect September afternoon, with the aspen trees beginning to turn golden on the mountainsides. They exchanged vows in Gunnison's small church, with Sheriff Miller standing as Lucas's best man and Sophia Jenkins as Catherine's matron of honor. The Turner brothers had spent weeks preparing the ranch for the celebration that followed, cleaning, painting, and constructing tables and benches to accommodate the guests. As dusk fell and lanterns were lit around the yard, Katherine found a quiet moment with Lucas away from their well-wishers. "Happy, Mrs. Prescott?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist. "Very," she confirmed, leaning into his embrace. "Though I'm still getting used to the name." "You could keep Harper if you prefer," he offered, "or we could hyphenate officially like the ranch." Katherine turned in his arms to face him. "You wouldn't mind?" "I want you as my wife," Lucas said. "The name matters less than that." Katherine considered for a moment. "No, I think I like being Katherine Prescott. It represents this new chapter of our lives." Later that night, after the guests had departed and they were finally alone, Lucas carried Katherine across the threshold of the home they had shared for nearly a year, now transformed by their new relationship. Their wedding night was tender and passionate, a natural progression of the love that had grown between them over the months of working side by side. Lucas was as considerate and attentive a lover as he was a partner, and Katherine discovered a depth of emotion and physical pleasure she had never imagined possible. As they lay together afterward, Katherine traced the line of Lucas's jaw with her fingertips. "When you paid my debt that day, did you ever imagine we'd end up here?" Lucas caught her hand and kissed her palm. "Honestly, no. I was too focused on the practicalities: good land, knowledgeable partner, solid investment. I didn't let myself think beyond that." "When did that change?" He considered the question. "I can't point to a single moment. It was gradual, watching you work, seeing your determination, admiring your spirit. By the time I recognized what was happening, it was already too late. I was falling in love with you." The following spring brought new beginnings to the Prescott Ranch. The winter had been mild, allowing their expanded herd to thrive. Catherine's horse training program had gained recognition throughout the region, with buyers coming from as far as Utah to purchase her carefully trained mounts. The additional well Lucas had commissioned was complete, providing reliable water even in the driest months. In April, Katherine confirmed what she had suspected for several weeks: she was expecting their first child, due in late autumn. Lucas received the news with joy and immediate concern for her well-being. "You'll need to take it easier," he insisted as they sat together on the porch swing after dinner. "No more breaking those wild mustangs, at least until after the baby comes." Katherine laughed. "I'm with child, not made of glass. Women have been having babies while working ranches for generations." "Not my wife, not with my child," Lucas said firmly, though his expression softened as he placed a hand gently on her still flat stomach. "We've worked too hard for this happiness to take unnecessary risks." They compromised, as they had learned to do in all aspects of their partnership. Katherine agreed to limit her horse training to gentler animals and to stay closer to the house as her pregnancy advanced. Lucas agreed not to hover excessively or treat her as an invalid. As summer turned to fall, Katherine's body changed to accommodate their growing child. Lucas watched these changes with wonder and increasing protectiveness, often finding excuses to handle tasks that would take her farther from home. "You're smothering me," Katherine complained one October afternoon when Lucas insisted on riding out to check a broken fence line that she had planned to inspect herself. "I'm loving you," he corrected, kissing her forehead. "There's a difference." The baby, a boy they named Thomas James Prescott, after both their fathers arrived on a cold November night with the assistance of the town midwife. After hours of labor, Katherine held their son in her arms, exhausted but triumphant. "He has your eyes," she told Lucas, who sat beside the bed, awestruck by the tiny, perfect being they had created. "And your determination," Lucas replied, noting the strong grip of the infant's tiny hand around his finger. "Poor child got the stubbornness of both of us." As their son grew, so did the prosperity of their ranch. By Thomas's first birthday, they had tripled their original cattle herd, added a flock of sheep that proved surprisingly profitable, and established a breeding program for quarter horses that attracted buyers from multiple states. They hired additional hands to manage the expanding operation, but Katherine and Lucas remained deeply involved in the daily work, passing Thomas between them as they went about their tasks. The boy thrived in the ranch environment, developing an early affinity for horses that delighted both his parents. Like mother, like son, Lucas observed one afternoon, watching 2-year-old Thomas fearlessly approach one of the gentler mares under Katherine's careful supervision. On the 5th anniversary of their partnership, a date they continued to celebrate alongside their wedding anniversary, Lucas surprised Katherine with the deed to a neighboring property he had quietly purchased. "The old Wilson place?" Katherine asked, examining the document. "But it's been abandoned for years. The land is still good," Lucas explained, "and it gives us access to the upper watershed. We're expanding, Mrs. Prescott, building something that will last for generations." Katherine looked up from the deed, emotion filling her eyes. "When you paid my debt that day, you said you were just making a good business decision." "I was," Lucas agreed with a smile, "the best business decision of my life." "And you never asked for anything in return," Katherine marveled. "Not once." "I got everything in return," Lucas said simply, drawing her into his arms. "A home, a family, a future. What more could any man ask for?" As they stood together on the porch of the home they had saved and transformed, watching their son play in the yard and surveying the thriving ranch that stretched in all directions, Katherine knew they had built something extraordinary, not just a successful business, but a partnership based on respect, a marriage founded on love, and a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. From near ruin to abundant prosperity, from business arrangement to deepest love, their journey had been unexpected but perfect in its own way. The bank's seizure of her ranch had seemed like the end of everything Katherine valued, but in reality, it had been just the beginning of a life more fulfilling than she could have ever imagined. As the sun set over the mountains, casting golden light across their land, Lucas pulled Katherine closer against the evening chill. "No regrets?" he asked softly, as he sometimes did. "Not a single one," she answered, as she always did. "Not a single one."